Well, everybody, thank you for coming for the second of the two sessions that are on brain chains. And we have people who are operating in some very interesting ways in terms of the way they integrate brains into food systems. And I'd like to say a few things about our speakers today. June Russell is the animating force behind New York NYC's Green Market Regional Grains Project. And that's a grain chain that encompasses the Northeast. And she's a slow food snail blazer for 2017, which is one of the high honors that Slow Food bestows upon people who've engaged in innovative projects and thinking about making good, clean, and fair food available to people. And if there's anyone who knows how grain connects with end users at the very nexus of consumption, it's June. I'll begin the introductions again. Our first the speaker today is going to be June Russell, who's the guiding light and animating power behind Grow NYC's Green Market Regional Grain Project. And if any of you are aware of this, this is a very powerful grain chain that encompasses the Northeast. She won Slow Food's Snail Blazer Award for 2017, which is one of the highest awards that Slow Food USA gives. And I think you have to say, if there's anyone who knows how grain connects with end users at the very nexus of consumption, it is June. That New York City market is one of the great markets in the United States. And next, we'll have Harold Wilkin, who grows on a 5-generation farm in central East Illinois. And at Janie's farm, he grows certified organic corn, soybeans, wheat, rye, oats, buckwheat, and other grains. And I'm sort of curious to understand what those other grains are. Maybe pseudo cereals like quinoa and things like that. Sorghum, perhaps. And they work with numbers of food companies, distillers, brewers, dairies, very diversified product stream. And Jill is the miller at Janie's farm, which is the milling operation, which is associated with this rather extensive family farm that has been established there in eastern Illinois. And of course, I invite you to elaborate, and I expect that you'll be explaining exactly the sorts of labors that you engage in the grain world in some detail. And I am David Shields. I chair the Carolina Gold Rice Foundation. I'll explain what that is also. I also had the Art of Taste for the South. That's the group which vets all of the most historically resonant, flavorful, and endangered products that are put forward to the global register of foods that's maintained in Italy. And I've published a number of books. The most recent ones are Southern Provisions, about the rise of Southern food, The Culinarians, which is a kind of history of the culinary profession in the United States. And coming out this year is going to be Taste the State, which is a sort of guide to the distributed foods of South Carolina. So I'll be talking about the Southeast, while we have the Northeast and the Midwest here. And I guess starting us off will be June.
Thank you for having me. I sat in on the previous panel, and it was really great to hear about all these projects that have emerged over the country over the last decade or so. And And it also made me kind of excited to participate in this group and a slow food audience and kind of the latitude that is there, to talk broadly around, agriculture and our food culture. So with that, I thought, I had a presentation sort of put together, but, I think some of the value chain work is pretty similar for all of us, of convening all the stakeholders on the various levels of the value chain, from research to end users, everyone in between, and the significant power that has when you do bring everybody together to connect with their food. I wanted to just share a couple of kind of background stories. My whole career has been in the food business. I spent half of it as a cook. And I think my first introduction to good bread was in the early 90s. And I was working at Zingerman's Delicatessen in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they wanted to start up a bakery because they were having difficulty finding good bread, frankly, and that was their style. Is if they couldn't find it, they were going to figure out how to make it. So this guy named Michael London, who had started the Rock Hill Bakehouse in New York, came and helped set up a bakery. And I think I still have his letter to staff that he wrote. He was so powerful and really a zealot about bread. And I remember my good friend and coworker and I talking about that, and that someone could be so passionate about bread. That was really the kind of an earlier wave of artisan bread making that really swept the country in the late 80s, early 90s, and set a new standard for bread production, and a couple of flour brands at that time too that were seen as higher quality than a traditional bleached flour. And obviously now we're going through a new wave of artisanal bread baking that is even deeper because of the way that it connects with the ingredients. People spoke to this in the earlier panel. Location, the connection with the producers, and it's a really wonderful thing to be a part of and to witness. I wanted to share another story of my foray into this work began when I moved into a position at Green Market, and they wanted me to pick up on some policy discussions, and one of them was about bakers using local grain, which had been kicking around earlier, 2002, 3, but then kind of stalled. So there was some turnover at the organization, and this had kind of languished. So, having a little bit of background in food, I had some understanding of the ingredients and what would be needed to make a decent bread, the difference between bread and pastry flour, some of those fundamental things. I mean, I was a bench worker. I was never really understood all of the intricacies that people get into now of the gluten development and crumb texture and things like that. But have had enough to be that liaison between those end users and the farmers, and understand what some of those quality parameters might look like. But really in 2007, kind of scratching my head going, where do we start? Is there even such a thing as local flour? What do we know? And I went to a NOFA New York conference. That's the Northeast Organic Farming Association, and lots of credit to our organic farmers and our organic community, where a lot of this work really comes from, in recognizing the need to add value to the small grains crops so they take their proper place in rotation. And that first conference that I went to, I heard Jack Laser from Butterworks Farm in Vermont speak, and in typical Jack fashion, he was very profound and humorous at the same time. He talked about being a back to the lander from the 1970s and wanting to be able to do everything for his family off of his farm. And so that included growing a bit of wheat so that they could make their own bread. And they did that, and they were really excited. They felt so empowered. And he said he took it down to the local co-op, and talked to them about selling his wheat to them, and they laughed and said, "We can get that from North Dakota from half the price." So this was 2008, and he said that year he had actually sold out of all of his grain crops, and he said, "I think we're getting somewhere." So, just to add some perspective of, this is a man with a 30, at that time, 40-year career, really seeing the shifts in the marketplace. And I think that just to keep in mind of like some of these major trends that we're very focused on, some of the minutiae of the things that we do, but that these larger trends have been at play. And one of those is definitely the rise of organic agriculture, which the national standards didn't exist until 1997. At that same time, GMO crops are coming into the marketplace, and consolidation is happening all around. Another story is of Champlain Valley Milling, which is about a 40-year-old milling business that evolved out of a seed cooperative. But as they grew, and as the market for organic grew, local growers couldn't really keep up with that demand, and so they started sourcing from Montana, Midwest, and part of that had to do with organic coming to scale. It's an interesting thing to contemplate that we were losing so much in our systems. At the same time, we were starting to gain some traction in a very different way. And I guess what I mean by that is really like another decade later when the local foods movement kicked into gear and gave a lot of these efforts a market, for one, and a lot of willing entrepreneurs who were eager to jump into the game, work with something that no one else was doing, and try to make a go of it, frankly. We work with 10 mills today that did not exist a decade ago. But you had, folks like a Greg Mull from Farmer Ground Flour being willing to say, "I'll try to be a miller. Sure, let's give it a go." These are obviously big jobs. These are trades, in fact. There's in a European system, folks would be spending many years as an apprentice before they became expert at what they did. And I think watching a lot of these systems evolve over the past decade or so, seeing some of that as well, as we recover some of these trades that are really core to our food system and what it means to really have a regional food system, a regional grains economy. One other person I want to certainly acknowledge is Robert Beauchemin from Milanese Mill up in Canada. We work in the Northeast, and some of that has to do with grant projects that we write. But if we really look at the larger bioregion, which would extend into Ontario, Robert really built up an impressive grain business from scratch. He was, again, that classic guy who flipped on a switch and started grinding grain. And it took about 25 years before he was ready to design, his next mill to be more efficient than building a patchwork business over the years. But he's also helped us quite a bit in looking at his model, certainly with some of the technical information around understanding the different wheat varieties. It's been an epic journey. I often say that, wheat is used as this symbol of simplicity, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Wheat is incredibly complex, from the growing conditions and the things that are trying to sabotage a decent crop, to getting it milled properly and baked. After a short amount of time, I realized that, every loaf of bread is a miracle. And it also helped me to understand why all these classic cookbooks utilize breadcrumbs so much in their recipes. It's because once you do understand what it takes to get this all the way through to your table, is really a miracle, and we want to use every crumb of it. Okay, so that was a big, broad picture of some of the background. At Green Market, we're obviously we're market-based and looking at kind of mobilizing consumers, and have been hammering away at that for a good decade. A lot of convenings, outreach, education, a lot of tastings, cooking demonstrations at markets have been significant. Really understanding that taste can be a game changer. Taste can be a life changer when folks have that experience literally. There's a bakery here in New York City called She Wolf Bakery, and they were one of the bakeries that very early on committed to using local flour. It took them 3 years to perfect their first 2 breads before they brought them to the market. And I think there was an article in either New Yorker or New York Magazine talking about the bread lines during COVID that were there for She Wolf bread. I mean, this is a modern bread line where you know, folks are lining up because there's something almost undescribably satisfying about that bread, and you got to wonder what is that? What is that? I like to think it's the local organic flour that they're using, plus their artisanship in making those breads. I think you know, maybe kind of another broad stroke description of this work is really looking at multiple markets and really considering what systems look like. And I don't know if I could say we fully have that, but we have elements of it and keep moving in that direction. I think with COVID, there's a much greater understanding of the need for having some amount of local infrastructure, some amount of capacity to raise these crops and have them utilized regionally. You know, we look at multiple markets for the farmer, with food grade being one piece of that, but certainly the craft beverage industry has been really important, and especially the distilleries. And part of that is because here in the Northeast, we deal with a lot of humidity and moisture, which impacts the quality of the crop, and we get this fungal disease that can't be used for human food, but it can be used in the distilling for distilling and won't survive the distilling process. So I think having that secondary market has been really key to the success of the whole system in New York, and to some extent the Northeast, because this is given a market to growers that if the quality can't reach food grade, they've got a secondary market to sell into, although there's several farmers that this is their primary market. And we also saw the value of that when COVID hit and the distilleries had the ability to pivot and start making hand sanitizer. So I think we're still on the beginning side of exploring what all the possible uses are, looking at whole system development, including more around animal feed, and you know, other applications that we haven't thought of yet even. David, I just want to check on time. I don't want to go over. I know there's folks have a lot to say, so I can pause there and hand off to someone else.
Thank you so much for that. That was excellent. So I think we'll go on to our next one. Jill and Harold, you want to take it away?
Hi, my name is Harold Wilkin, and I've been an organic farmer now for the last 16 years that we've been certified. And and so we are a fifth generation farm. At the present time, my son and I are partners in the farm, and then my nephew. First of all, can everybody hear okay with this mask on? I can drop it if I need to. So anyway, so we have grown exponentially on our farm as far as the acres we do, based mostly on the fact that as as we transitioned 15 years ago, people started to recognize that there was an alternative to conventional farming. And so we were asked by a number of landowners over the past 15 years to take on their farms, rent them, and then transition them to organic. So Janie's farm has grown quite a bit. We raised roughly 1,000 acres of small grains, 1,000 acres of corn, and 1,000 acres of soybeans a year. Anyway, Jill, you want to get ready to, so we're going to bring up some slides here so you can see what we have going on with the farm, and then we'll go into the mill.
I'm going to try this. All right.
Okay, so you can see this is my son Ross and my nephew Tim. This was harvest from a couple of years ago. Janie's farm, like I said, we started about 16 years ago in organics, and then in 2016 we decided to build the flour mill, and Jill will be talking more about the flour mill later. Okay, yeah. So the mill, the farm and the mill were named after our daughter who passed in 2001, and it was after that that we were contacted by Jill's dad, Herman Brockman, who got us started going, transitioning to organic. And after 2 years, I realized that was my future, and that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. In the upper right-hand corner, I do a lot of the delivery for the mill. So I'm on the back of the truck. I meet the distillers, I meet the brewers, I meet the bakers, and also our other customers, millers, so on and so forth. So that's an important part of what we do. On the lower right-hand side is my wife, who's been my partner since 1983. And anyway, she's been supportive even when we kind of questioned, or she kind of questioned in the beginning, am I doing the right thing? So there we are with our crops. That is actually Bloody Butcher corn on the left. Then those are Clear Highland soybeans. They're a special soybean that are high protein, large in size. We have when you mentioned the Japanese market, we sell to a mind, body, and spirit group that I'm a part of named Shumei. But then we also work with soy milk producers and tofu producers across the United States. The third slide is our cover crops growing in our wheat. And then we have raised Streaker Hollis oats, which is your fourth slide there picture. Here's a picture of us harvesting our Bloody Butcher corn this year. Plus we've been messing around with a composite of all different types of polenta corns that was started by Bill Davidson from the U of I Extension, and he's moved on now to the Savannah Institute. But he got me started in working with this type of corn. We are doing some no-till practices. We're rolling down rye, putting in soybeans. In the top left-hand corner is our soybean seeder or wheat and rye seeder. The right-hand corner is us harvesting wheat. Can't help but love that sunset. We also work with the University of Illinois, University of Madison, Wisconsin, and Cornell, doing strip trials of ancient wheats, and also they're doing some breeding. Julie Dawson is bringing in some varieties from Europe and crossing them with varieties that we're using to gather the taste of the older grains, as well as helping to make the wheats more easier for us to grow. And then I love this buckwheat picture. We use buckwheat sometimes in between our crops when there's a issue where we don't get a cover crop put in earlier in the year. And so we have buckwheat in the fall. This is actually a picture of us the first year we did these plots. I have a plot combine, and this was us working with the University of Illinois to harvest those plots. We also work with the corn breeder at the U of I, corn breeders, to recognize different varieties of corn, both open pollinated and hybrid, that are best bred and suited for organic production. So yeah, so now we're going to work into, Jill's going to talk about our milling process.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for having us. It's quite an honor to be amongst all these people who have so much knowledge. I'm pretty new at all of this. Harold asked me to come and work here at Janie's Mill approximately 4 years ago. And it's been quite a journey, and I'm continually learning, and I appreciate all the knowledge that other millers have passed on to me. Especially, I would like to mention Greg Mole out at Farmer's Ground Flour in New York, and Steve Jones out at Camas Country Mill in Oregon. They both have really helped me along the way when I had questions, and I still, of course, have questions, and guided me along the way. So I appreciate that. So Janie's Mill is a natural extension of Janie's Farm. We're just right down the road from the main property of Janie's Farm. And here at the mill, we carefully stone grind all many of the different grains that Janie's Farm, Harold and Ross Wilkin and Tim Vasky grow in their fields. It's a combination of hybrid and heritage and ancient grains, and we like to try new grains all the time. I wanted to just say I'm really excited today because for the first time we milled Durham wheat, made some semolina flour today, and also did some black emmer. So that's a really great day in my life when we get to mill new grains, especially some of the heritage and ancient grains. It's just almost like an experiment every time that I get to do a new grain and produce a new flour. So we'll move along. Here is an image of Janie's Mill. And right now we have 2 stone mills from Denmark called Ensko Stone Mills. And those, they're on either side of this image of the mill. They're on the floor there, and it's hard to see behind the structure. You can't really see them from this angle, and they are encased, so it's a little difficult to see. But the mills are on the floor. It's a mirror image, and then up above where you see the shiny metal. Those are the sifter compartments. There's 3 of them where the different size screens go. And the whole system here is a vacuum system. So the flour is pulled from the mill up into the sifters, through the sifters, and then up into those holding tanks that are above the bagger where you see the young man bagging the flour into 50-pound bags. So this is our setup. We use the black Pro boxes to feed the mill, gravity fed into the mill. And down below, those are some of our products that we mill from the grains, primarily from Janie's farm, but other farms that we partner with throughout the country. We have approximately 30 different products that we sell both wholesale and retail. We also have some transitional grains. When the farm is transitioning from conventional to organic, the second year, the mill can purchase those grains for a lesser price, and then we pass on that savings to bakers who don't necessarily need 100% organically certified flours, grits, and grains, but they are raised without the use of any chemicals, of course, in that second year of transition. So this is great for the farmers because they're getting a little bit more for those grains than they would get if they were sold on the commodity market. And then, of course, encouraging other land to be transitioned to organic farming. Here again, some images of some of our retail packaging, some of the different varieties of flour that we sell. Another image of the mill floor from a little bit different angle there. In the bottom left, you have Harold, looks like he's emptying some sort of wheat from a wagon, and inspecting the grain there in the middle. And this photo at the bottom right, we just had recently, is that a family friend, I think, of Harold's?
Yes, a family friend of ours who was teaching her granddaughters to and grandsons to bake. And we offer a bread kit that comes with everything you need to bake your first loaf of bread. And she was using that bread kit to bake the first loaf of bread for her and her or she was teaching her grandchildren then how to bake the bread.
Just some more images of different products that we produce here at Janie's Mill. Here are some of our ancient and heritage grains and flours. We especially love the turkey red. I believe that's on the Ark of Taste. Very versatile grain and flour, great for bread baking, but works as an all-purpose, almost a whole wheat, like all-purpose flour. So we were very honored earlier this year, actually right before COVID hit. We became a slow food community, and we named ourselves the Midwest Regional Grain Chain. And it was kind of, oh, I'm just saying goodbye to one of my millers. Okay, goodbye. So anyway, we became this slow food community, mainly because we saw the infrastructure between farmers, bakers, both home and professional, chefs, distillers, brewers, and millers like ourselves. And we just felt like we already had started a community here. Harold is wonderful at building community. And we felt like we wanted to extend that community out a little bit more. And so then COVID hit and things got put on the back burner because we became so busy here at the mill during the flour shortage, and we're just now recovering, I think. So we're kind of reaching back and going to get more involved now with the slow food community that we want to start with different members in our community. This slide I just wanted to include because in 2018, because Harold was unable to be a delegate at Tierra Madre, I went in his place, and it was at that Tierra de Madre event that I really felt like the importance, I guess, of building a community around grain, local grain. And we met some people here that I still think about, and that's why I wanted to put this slide in, is down at the bottom left, there is a young farmer from the northeastern part of Italy. And in that area, they began growing three crops: soft red or soft wheat flour, rye flour, and cornmeal. And that is what goes into this bread in the bottom right-hand photo there, the pan di sork. And it is recognized for its environmental, cultural, and social and economic benefits because of those three grains that are grown in that region. And this goes way back in their history. And it was kind of resurrected by this woman in the middle, down in the middle there. And she recovered the grains, and farmers started growing small plots of these grains again, like they had in the past, to create this bread. So that kind of inspired me and got me thinking about like end users and how we can, Harold and the farmers can grow the grains here. We can mill them into quality, nutritious flours. And then we have our bakers who can produce things not maybe the pan de sork, but similar products that are from our region and from our grain chain. So, and then that picture up above there, that was the next day I got home from Italy, and I had the pan de sork in my hands in our mill, and that was just kind of a neat moment. And then here we are in Harold's Field, beautiful amber waves of grain. And that's the end of, I guess, my presentation.
Thank you so much. You got a very graphic picture of from field to mill to the hands of a home baker there. So, Jeff, you want to load the next set of slides here? As I said, I'm David Shields, and I had a group that isn't exactly a grain chain. It's a foundation we call the Carolina Gold Foundation, which is a grain chain and more. We were formed in 2004 as a nonprofit in response to pleas from chefs in Charleston and Savannah who were complaining they were using local food, but the oldest generation of diners complained that somehow the taste had evaporated from what was going on. And in particular, they complained about the rice. Now, in the low country of the Southeast, rice was the key grain. So Glenn Roberts convened a group of people. Next one.
Oh, sorry, there we go.
And we formed the Carolina Gold Rice Foundation. While Carolina Gold, the famous staple rice of the Southeast, was definitely our first focus, you will see in this picture of the number of restorations that we've engaged in that we, from the first, understood that if you were going to bring back the essential grains of a region, you had to bring back the co-crops, the rotation crops, the associated soil building and culinary crops of that region. So we, from the first, we had a polycropping, rotation cropping model, and we were interested in bringing back every enduring steady cellar of grain and co-crop that was there. We had a list. We actually did 2.5 years of research before we began the actual cultivation and securing of the material. Before we did the first thing, we knew exactly that we wanted to bring back things which had endured for over 50 years, had installed themselves into the foodways of the Southeast. Next one. From the first, we understood that there had to be a broad group of diverse expertises, and you notice that we have geneticists, millers, entomologists, crop scientists. The crop scientist, Dr. Brian Wood, now the president of the foundation. We have chefs, we have farmers. I'm a historian, we have educator and historic site administrators, and we have processors. So every dimension of the world of grain is reflected in the group that deliberates the directions of restoration. Jeff, next one. So I thought we'd take a look at what were the essential crops, and none of these were all non-existent on the American landscape. And we brought these all back. Carolina gold rice, a condiment rice, a West African upland rice, field rice that we found in Trinidad that survived, and also another West Indian hill rice that came into the South after the Civil War, Gotha rice. What's interesting about the upland rices is that they can be grown without the extraordinary outlay of capital that you have to take to grow water-based rices. You can use these as fowl feed or for small-scale production. People have always been sort of fretting about the cost of doing heirloom grains, and doing heirloom rice is a very costly procedure indeed. But if you use these upland rice materials, even at small farmers, using SRI, growing it like a garden crop. Next one. We were interested in the wheats that were available. There were three classic wheats, all that were developed in the post-revolution in the South: white May, purple straw, and red May wheat. These are the original biscuit, cake, and whiskey wheats of the South. We located all of these. The white May survived in the Pacific Northwest. The purple straw was grown as a commodity wheat up until the 1970s and still grown by the Amish. The red May wheat is a wonderful wheat that individual farmers grew. And all of these are now in the process of having seed developed so that they can be grown in quantity. Next. One of the most interesting ones was discovered that in the middle of the 18th century, the Salzburgers, the very best millers in the early South, imported Camellia wheat from Durham, Camellia Durham wheat from Sicily. And this was the original pasta wheat grown in the South. And in 1790, the man named Angelo Santin made the first Southern mac and cheese in Charleston. We had a situation through much of the 20th century where neither the wheat nor the cheese of Southern mac and cheese came from the South. Now we have the wheat restored, and we have enough artisanal cheese makers to actually have a Southern mac and cheese. Next one. The barley that we have brought back has been largely for feed, and these were bare barley and sixth-grade Tennessee winter barley. Both wonderful things to operate with, locally adapted through many generations, extraordinary good pollen, and a wonderful, wonderful grain. Next. Oats are very interesting because the heirloom oats all have a higher protein profile than modern grain oats. The one you see in the middle, Virginia Prairie Winter Oat, is actually bred to be a horse feed. And racehorses were the fetish of people in early Virginia, so they made this oat like horse rocket fuel. It's about 24% protein versus 16, 17 for standard. Only white oats were eaten by humans up until the 20th century in any large scale. The potato oat that you see inside is the oat that is preferred. Next one. Rye, the Southeast has the original sort of black, small, tall black rye that was grown throughout the United States. And in the early 20th century, Abruzzi was brought in by the USDA plant hunters from Italy, and that is now extensively grown, particularly at Renz Abruzzi in 1953 improvement. Next one. Now, in terms of the maize land races, Sea Island whiteflint corn and white gourd seed corn are the two ones that were entirely developed by Native Americans. The Sea Island whiteflint is a coastal corn. The gourd seed is a soft milling corn from the woodlands and the ancestor of the Bents. And do the next one. There are also two types of flint corns with really extraordinary carotene profiles, guinea flint and yellow Creole corn. That Creole corn is the basis for Cajun Kush Kush and the New Orleans yellow milling grits. Next one. The settler Bents are the cornmeal corns, and in 2017 we located the one grower of Cox Prolific, the great standard Virginia bent corn, a 96-year-old man, a Manning farmer in Langdon, South Carolina, who has grown it since the 1940s. And he's the last grower. And there it is. And now it's on the Arctic coast and available, being grown from Maine down to Arizona. Jimmy Red is one of the red bent corns which are beloved by bourbon makers. Next. So one of the things that we have to deal with these various corns is the fact that whenever you put a land race is one of these sort of farmer improved corns that is extraordinarily genetically diverse. Whenever you plant it into a soil or a climatic condition which is not the one that it's nurtured in, it will produce a different plant. And in order to focus the genetics to prevent it from straying too far from the plant whose original qualities made people imported or transported, you have to have geneticists working with you. And this is particularly the case now that we also have the stressor of climate change taking place. So every grain that we operate with in our system is vetted and overseen by one or another of the geneticists, and the same goes for the field peas that we do, the oil seeds and the cane varieties. One of the great problems, and this is probably the last thing that I'll really stress in my presentation, is that to produce grain, you have to have reliable seed at a certain scale. And getting seed to commercial size that is true, is a really costly venture. And for rice, we have the Texas Rice Improvement Association, but we also have seed houses operating in South Carolina. Hurricanes have destroyed the seed reserves in certain years in Texas and in South Carolina. So it's a very expensive procedure. And one of the great anxieties that we have going forth is every one of these land races that we bring back has to have a seed discipline imposed on it, and it has to have a certain population developed. And here are people from West Africa looking at the seed house in South Carolina, looking at the methods being used here. So the other things that we would have to say is that I'm going to advance it again here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that, David?
Next slide. So next one too. And next one. The farmers, the millers, distillers are all networked. And the Carolina Gold Rice Foundation operates as an educator. We actually go out and do news stories about these various varieties and supply seed to people who need to have it. So that gives a kind of overview of the southeastern system, which is different than the sort of wheat-centric systems in the other parts of the United States. And looks like we're very close to the exhaustion of our time, closing in on 5 o'clock, but if there is anyone who would like to make a comment or if there'd be further observation from June, Jill, or Harold, now's the time.
Do you have any questions for us real quickly, or really appreciate the program. And June, just a mention that I only got to meet Jack at San Jose, excuse me, a few years ago, but there were so many things that him and I could have spent hours and hours discussing. And I miss his spirit.
Yep. It's a big loss for us this year. Yep. One of the luminaries.
Well, friends, we've reached 5 o'clock, so let's congratulate ourselves for a job well done, and welcome further comment in one of the breakout windows. If you want to talk to one of us there, or our contact information is part of our profiles here, and you can contact us. Okay?
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Be well.
Thank you.
So everyone, we appreciate your contribution to the Seed Summit, and this was a great discussion. I want to mention that we have a interesting panel or an interesting open session going on. It's called "Why Do Fishermen Care About Organic Seeds?" And it's with our slow fish people, Amy Grodin and Kevin Stribner. So if you want to have, you want to learn about why it's important, the connection between seed and fish, please go over and join them. So thanks again, everyone, and hope to see you tomorrow. It's Community Seed Day, and I'll be moderating some panels about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.